June brought warmer weather and a huge uptick in the amount of games I played in a month. Hello, I'm Lovely's mom, and this is the over halfway point in me playing 100 games from the past 30 years, roughly 3 per year, and ranking them. Currently, the standings are as such, listed on the screen. A handful of titles moved up from the end of last month, nothing major. I don't think there will be major shakeups as I peruse over the list between videos. As always, I will remain spoiler-free, and I don't go in-depth enough to call it a review, but they are brief, or sometimes longer, discussions on what I thought worked about the game and what didn't. For June, I played a whopping 20 games, which is more than any other month. Those games are The Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, Botanicula, Root Double After Days Before Crime X10 Edition, Legend of Grimrock, Dominique Pamplemousse in It's All Over When the Fat Lady Sings, Gingiva, Heroine's Quest, The Herald of Ragnarok, The Banner Saga, Lisa the Painful, Valkyria Chronicles, Off Peak, Her Story, Dropsy, Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor, I Am Setsuna, Yakuza Kiwami, The Difference Between Us, Noid 2, Enter the Void, Cattails, and Heaven Will Be Mine. (2011) The Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, the only biphobic anime game I'm aware of, is an RPG developed by Nihon Falcom and published in Japan by Nihon Falcom, the EU by Ghostlight for the PSP version, and worldwide by Xseed Games. It technically released across a number of years, but since I'm cherry-picking, let's say 2012 for PS3. I picked it because I didn't want to ditch Ni no Kuni for a non-RPG, and it was in my partner's library, and it's a series that I've long been curious about. The story opens with Estelle, our protagonist, begrudging that her father hasn't returned home. But when he does, he has brought an injured boy with him. The boy's name is Joshua, and he gets adopted into the family. Time passes, and Estelle and Joshua have been pursuing certification to become bracers, this world's version of official adventurers. You join them in their adventures as junior bracers to obtain senior status, as well as witnessing and becoming a part of a larger scheme taking place in the country. The gameplay of Trails in the Sky is turn-based on a grid. Maneuver your characters around on it for positioning, cast spells, attack, and so on. There is also a system for non-spell moves revolving around craft points, which you get from dealing or taking damage. These points get you some additional moves, but if you get 100 or more, you can activate them as an interrupt in combat to use special moves. The whole thing is very competent. My one criticism with it is selecting targets for healing. Revive spells, for example, don't automatically select downed members. Minor nitpick, I know, but it still frustrated me. Another pain point was leveling up and experience points. Enemies don't give a set amount of XP. Instead, the amount is determined by zone and player level. While I appreciate this in aggregate, and it lets allies catch up or not get too far ahead, it always felt like I was bumping up against it rather than smoothing my experience with the game over. It occurred to me, about a third of the way through the game, how very anime-paced it was. You'd get to a new area, get a handful of filler quests, along with the zone storyline to follow, all while nudging along the overarching story. Which was a good time, don't get me wrong, but when I got to the end of the game, it definitely felt more like the end of the first arc of the story than a satisfying end in its own right. A notable feature of the version I played, on the PC, is its speed boost. One of your buttons speeds up everything in the game by a value you set before you start. It speaks to my impatience, I believe, that I relied so heavily on this that a majority of my time was spent holding this button down. Maybe if the pacing was faster by default, I wouldn't have noticed or used it. It probably didn't help I just came off Persona, which sets a brisk pace for its movement in combat. The Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, braces for its job at 19th. As much as I'm critical of many aspects of the game, I enjoyed the story and characters a lot. They each felt fleshed out, and even though it's only a third of the total story, the experience here left me curious for more. I'd be scared to play the second, though, if it starts with a level reset. So much of this game was Estelle and Joshua's journey to become worthy of the title of Bracer, and setting them to level 1 again would suck. But I shan't know. Too many other games I have more interest in. 2012. Botanicula, the most heartwarming game starring 5 weird plant creatures, is a point-and-click adventure game developed and published by Amanita Design. I picked it because it was another one of those well-received artsier games that I'd heard of and never really looked into, but owned some from Epic Games giveaways. Also worth noting that this is the same developer as Machinarium. Botanicula's opening is as short and sweet as Machinarium's. A group of plant folk are tasked with taking a seed from a tree to the ground to plant it, all while avoiding spindly shadow creatures that want to suck up the life around them. The gameplay stands apart from many of its point-and-click siblings. Rather than collecting items and combining them in odd ways to progress, most screens have all the solutions you need. If not, you use an item you gain on one spot. The game's logic is more peculiar than most in the genre, but by constraining your options, the only available path is usually clearer to find. The art style is the key player here for me. It does a lot of work making for a charming world. That and its surreal nature make the game a joy to play, especially seeing all these little friend-shaped creatures interact, how they move and work. Botanicula grows its way to 20th place. In comparison with its contemporaries, I enjoyed it a lot. I think in large part due to eschewing its more well-known kin. It was a really cute and sweet game. Root Double Before Crime After Days Extend Edition, the least horny visual novel I've ever played, is a visual novel developed by Regista and Yeti and published by Yeti in Japan and Sekai Project everywhere else. I picked it because its humorously lengthy title and already owned status. My partner had, at some point, picked up an enormous bundle of visual novels for under $1, so yeah. I also picked it because it was a visual novel. The opening for, I'll just call it Root Double, sorry Australians, is already complicated because you are presented with an option before you begin, to play the after story or the before story. I'll just talk about the opening for the A route here. You are in the perspective of Watase Kasasagi, the leader of a professional rescue team called Sirius. After a fire breaks out at the 6th Laboratory of Atomic and Biological Organization, or Labo, your team is dispatched. Something curious happens, and Watase is confronted with something he calls a monster, which does something to his brain. He loses consciousness and memories. Classic amnesia. After he wakes up, the facility is in lockdown, so he and the other survivors must do everything they can to stay alive and escape. The gameplay is none, almost, I guess. In lieu of making a choice of what to say or do at branch points, you are instead to use the Senses Sympathy system. Every character is mapped to an Enneagram personality, and with each interaction you can decide with a slider on something about the character, how important they are, how connected to them the perspective is. I'm not actually sure, but it changes the results of how your character proceeds. I'll start this off by saying I don't like visual novels. I think most of my dislike is that they are neither gamey enough to be a game to me, or as simple and easy to read as a novel. I have enjoyed things like the Zero Escape and Danganronpa games, which I've seen counted among visual novels, but I believe their more involved sequences of gameplay set them apart in my mind. I have enjoyed something like Doki Doki Literature Club, which is a more or less straightforward visual novel, but it has the distinction of being fairly short. But something like Root Double, which clocked in for me at 26 hours, was far too long. To me, there is nothing specific about a visual novel that necessitates the format. Just make it a book. I was originally going to make a ternary graph to try and plot where I consider games begin and where they're just movies or books, but I think the I know it when I see it applies here. I think the more striking thing for me is that unlike other game genres I don't enjoy or dabble in, visual novels just baffle me. There are certain gimmicks with presentation that visual novels have over the classic paper, sure, but when I think of something like House of Leaves, which also has its gimmicks that don't need me to sit in front of my computer, I'm left confused. Why visual novels? The genre fascinates me. Specifically, their qualification as games. I don't understand it. Though, if you look at the achievements for something like Root Double, it's in line with other games. The drop-off in achievement completion as you go drops fairly linearly until you hit a certain percentage, then plateaus. Because if you've gotten this far, you probably want to finish it. Root Double Before Crime After Days Extend Edition sympathies its way to 35th place. I like the story of Root Double well enough. That's all I can really say about a visual novel, I think. Because that's all it really has, its story. If there's any visual novel heads in the comment section, actually, wait, let me make it really clear right here. Visual novels have value in the medium of art. My touchstone for this is YouTuber Amelie Dory, link in the description. She has a large catalog of excellent videos on visual novels and their themes. I just don't like playing them, personally. It's the same with point-and-click or 4X games or a lot of multiplayer stuff. It's just not for me. I think it just rubs me the wrong way that there are these things that I want to be able to experience because people say they're really amazing, but they just don't click with me. To delve into the how and why of visual novels are considered games and what games even are is a whole big essay that has been done. So, on to the next game. Legend of Grimrock, the video game version of you and your squad getting stoned and dancing around while you beat up animals in a dungeon. Hallucinogenics may or may not be involved. Is an action RPG developed and published by Almost Human. I picked it because I had it for a long time, and even though I haven't played the games it's inspired by, this one seemed like a good love letter to the genre. The story premise is that prisoners in a fantasy world get pardoned, but their location of release is on top of an enormous spire. So if they actually want to live free lives, they'll have to get to the bottom through a fiendish dungeon. The gameplay, while considered an action RPG on Wikipedia, harkens to a very specific type of game, which itself is harkening to a specific kind of tabletop RPG dungeon crawl. Go through a grid-based dungeon, solving puzzles and killing monsters, with a party of 4 that takes up 1 tile. The combat involves right-clicking on the portraits of your characters to make attacks, while strafing and dodging around enemies. Challenges arise when the corridors and hallways are tight. You might bump up against them or another monster. The puzzles are based mostly around switches, pressure plates, and riddles. This game was a real treat to play, mostly. The puzzles were mostly up my alley with a couple that stumped me, but luckily most of the harder puzzles are for extra rewards and not mandatory. The combat, likewise, was not what I was expecting, which was good and bad. The movement and map awareness required to keep your party from taking too much damage work really well together. My problem with it, however, is that any wrong move felt generally far more punishing than was strictly necessary. But even with the hiccups, the moments of triumph really kept me chugging through the game, and plenty of game there is. I played it for about 12 hours, which was a quick pace, but the real meat of what this game offers is its custom dungeons. I'd imagine. I didn't actually do any, but there is easily 10 times as much playtime to be had in custom dungeons from my cursory browsing, if not more. Though, if this style of game is interesting to you, I'd recommend picking up the second one, as that has more support and features. One aspect I enjoyed from this game is the amount of knowledge you gain about the dungeon as you go. The upper floors are picked through and more worn. As you get more into the meat of the dungeon, you learn more about it and its creators. But you also get familiar enough with its enemies and trap designs that hearing certain sounds or layouts of rooms is an immediate tip-off. Then there are the subversions of it to consider too. Legend of Grimrock delves its way to 14th place. There are so many good ideas on display with a lot of good execution. The fact the story is so light pales in comparison to the groundwork almost human laid here. 2013.
Haven't had a case in ages.
Dominique Pamplemousse in It's All Over Once the Fat Lady Sings, The Thinking Them's Disco Elysium, is an interactive fiction game developed and published by Deirdre Kai Productions for PC. The opening is, well, the game is like an hour total, but Dominique Pamplemousse is a detective who is down on their luck. No money for rent. Lucky for them, a new case walks in the door. Pretty classic gumshoe stuff. The game, as it is closer to a visual novel than a point-and-click, but you walk around, ask questions, and occasionally use some items. As harsh as I was for Root Double just being a novel, I liked this. 1,000% just because runtime. It's just short, sweet, utilizes the medium's music in a good way, it's got a fun little mystery behind it, and the sets and characters are all charming. Dominique Pamplemousse in It's All Over Once the Fat Lady Sings gumshoes their way to 18th, and first for the longest title. But yeah, overall, this was just a nice little fun time, had a neat story. Also, it's a musical. I'm going to throw a content warning for flashing lights and eye strain here. I'll try to avoid it in the edit, but this game's got a lot. You can skip here to get my ranking and final thoughts, which I'll ensure will have none. Gingiva. If you had to pick between this and the gum disease, pick this. Is an RPG developed and published by My Former Selves for PC. I'll be honest, I'm not even sure how I found this game, as most of the games on this list came from combing through Wikipedia. But I found it, and here it is now. The game opens with our protagonist at her job sorting toys? I'm not entirely sure what she's doing, but it's on a sort of makeshift assembly line. Notably, she is missing her head, which is replaced with a turnkey. She is reprimanded for not doing her job well enough and sent to a pit. Before long, however, a set of teeth dig a hole and offer us a way out and to try and find our original head. The gameplay is turn-based combat. It's an RPG Maker game, after all. Its closer comparisons, however, are Space Funeral and Helix. Many of the traditional spells are swapped out for far more bizarre systems that must be figured out as you go. I do think it's doing and trying to have more vegan meat to the gameplay, but it never gave me too much pushback in battles. It fascinates me that RPG Maker has this subset of users who really push the system to the edge of what you'd expect to make with the tools. All while underneath the hood, it's just an RPG Maker game. As a development tool, I think it's fantastic. It affords artists to make things that riff on the medium of games while not needing an excessive amount of programming experience. Honestly, one of the few complaints I have, aside from the occasional visual nightmare, is recovering. It's very generous and gives you a button to just let you recover all of your vim and verve, the health and energy for the game. The issue is that you recover vim much faster than verve, which means the wait time for a full restore is a lot longer than feels necessary. Gingiva chomps its way to 4th place. I didn't really write that much about this game, in spite of its high spot, but its atmosphere, music, and wit really landed with me. The world and story it presented were great. Heroine's Quest, the Herald of Ragnarok, you got my point-and-click mixed up with your action game, is a point-and-click action-adventure game developed and published by Crystal Shard for PC. I picked it because all the screenshots I looked at had immense charm, and you got to play as a woman, which is a huge plus. The game opens with the heroine traveling in a snowy land, her presence requested by a Jarl looking for help ending the seemingly never-ending winter. Along the way, an avalanche is caused by a two-headed troll, and we're left for dead. We wake in the nearby town's adventurer guild, and we're ready to adventure, after we get some food. The gameplay is mostly point-and-click adventure game. The major difference is the addition of stats and combat. Before you start, however, there are 3 classes. While the big picture events of this game will take roughly the same path, your choice of class will determine quite a lot. It's basically how difficult puzzles are, as well as some combat differences, and there is also a difficulty slider for mechanics. The classes are a warrior, who will generally take the straightforward approach, a wizard who uses spells and wits to solve their problems, and the rogue who will heavily rely on cunning and trickery to survive. I found this an excellent addition that provides a good incentive for replayability. The most compelling divergence from a standard point-and-click is its other systems. Aside from the puzzles you have to worry about, sleeping, hunger, the cold, and your stamina, you will die should those bars run out. All managed by a variety of things in-game, none of them ever felt punishing, just a realistic aspect of a winter and adventurer life. It also helps drive home the threat. The winter gets colder. The combat, for what it is, feels good. Dodge strikes and retaliate with your own. Learn to watch your opponents to know how to counter. A bit like a simplified Punch-Out. I liked Heroine's Quest quite a bit, with some unfortunate caveats. First, the good parts. The story and characters were good fun, and you'll be getting to know the dozen or so cast members fairly well, with how often you have to talk to them. There's also the fun detail that certain dialogue changes if others are present. I already mentioned it, but the combat is nice and sporting. The pixel art is great, and even though there's a mix of much higher fidelity stuff with the simple, it all works together. The music is also phenomenally wintry. The downsides are multitudinous and finicky. There is a day and night cycle, and the NPCs have schedules. Fair enough. Problem is, you don't have a clock, or a way to track their schedules, unless you write it down, but it still never felt quite regular. I think my frustration just came when I had to wait around for specific persons to be in specific places for a single task before I could move on. I also mentioned stats and skills, and I'm unsure if it's an issue with the other classes, as I started as a mage after a bit as a warrior, but the mage's skills is where I got frustrated. Every spell has its own level. So if I needed to do something that required a spell that wasn't high enough level, I'd just have to cast that spell over and over until it worked. It's a level of tedium that felt unnecessary when it could have just been tied to the general spellcasting stat. Heroine's quest, the Herald of Ragnarok, adventures its way to the 24th spot. Although it had a lot of charm and was refreshing to get something outside of the normal point-and-click, it still had the point-and-click debuff. 2014. The Banner Saga. I think I made the right choice here. Oh, never mind. The worst one, actually, is a tactical RPG developed by Stoic and published by Versus Evil for most things. I picked it because it was long a game I had heard good things about, and what do you know, it was in my library. The game opens with a caravan of Varl, the game's race of giant folk, going around and collecting taxes. And this isn't the true thrust of the story. Plus, it follows a couple of perspectives, so the true beginning is with another group. A town on the other end of the continent is attacked by a race? People? Called the Dredge. They ransack the village and force the clansfolk to flee west. The gameplay is strategic in and out of combat. Between combat encounters, you have decisions to make in order to keep your traveling group fed, morale high, and keep them alive. During battle, you can field up to 6 characters in grid-based, turn-based combat. The combat has a nice flow, as every turn is you, then the enemy. There is no speed stat for determining who gets to move first. Your characters have 6 stats: armor, strength, willpower, exertion, and break. Armor prevents you from getting hurt, but can be broken. Strength is your health, but determines how much damage you deal, so you lose health, you lose damage. Willpower is a spendable resource for abilities and increasing the power of attacks. Exertion is how much willpower you can use in a turn to increase armor or strength damage. Break is the option for attacking armor. Wrap all that up with different classes, a leveling system, and items that give buffs, and you've got a very neat and clean combat system. I really liked Banner Saga. The decisions felt impactful and punishing or rewarding, but within reason. There were a handful of times that felt truly like I was going to lose because some bad decisions, only to persist. The rewards for making the right choices never ballooned past being a reprieve. With 2 sequels, I was scared that decisions here would feel small, but they never felt like it. I'd be curious to see how those decisions play out long-term. Similarly, I thought it was an interesting and smart choice that characters who fall in combat do not die permanently, but become injured, lowering their max strength until they have a chance to rest. Resting costs valuable time and resources, as you could be on the road instead, but resting improves morale as well, so if the morale of your caravan is already low, then maybe it's worth doing. This entire game is a balancing act in the face of adversity and overwhelming odds. Those odds being the end of the world, which neither start nor end with this game. I had more criticism of the same thing with the Trails game, because that felt like the first chapter of a story, which is the case in the naming scheme of the series, versus Banner Saga being the first book in a trilogy. It's also worth mentioning here that the art is absolutely gorgeous. Backgrounds, characters, environments, animations all shine with polish. The music accents it perfectly too. The Banner Saga makes the arduous journey to 3rd place. I've had trouble with games that have similarly weighty decisions like XCOM or Darkest Dungeon, but I was able to roll with the punches for Banner Saga. Lisa the Painful. This game wants to hurt you. Physically, emotionally, and in the funny bone. is an RPG developed and published by Dingaling Productions for a lot of stuff. I picked it because it seemed like a game I would enjoy, so to speak. I've had it in my library, I've wanted to watch video essays about it. Now was the time. Lisa the Painful opens with a group of kids bullying another. After they finish, you are left to walk home, where your dad throws a bottle at your head for getting beat up. Cut 2 years later, after an apocalypse, and the character, Brad, has grown up. Wandering outside of his tiny hut, he comes across a baby, a girl. All women have vanished from the earth in this apocalypse, and so he takes it upon himself, with some help from friends, to raise her safely. Years later, she's kidnapped. Time to go find her. The gameplay is mostly typical for bizarre RPG Maker fare. Your usual surreal RPG Maker game will make enough adjustments to stand out from a normal version while retaining the basics. Some skew further and some care less about combat. Lisa is in the former camp. There is a bevy of status effects and a huge roster of recruitable characters that can form wildly different gang compositions. Each character has unique movesets as well. Not just a normal attack and special moves either. Some input combos, others drink to improve their tech points. Some do just attack normally. Not to mention, all of these moves are animated. Lisa takes a huge note from Earthbound, to be sure. Earthbound for adults, if you will. It will make you laugh, maybe cry, and hopefully think. One interesting comparison I noticed directly after Banner Saga are how choices are treated. Lisa provides you with a large number of choices, most of which are inconsequential. In terms of larger story and gameplay, anyhow. But as much as I was making decisions on things that felt like they should be impactful, they weren't. You can't choose to be a good person here. It is hard, if not impossible, to be a good person in the world of Lisa. You'll kill people like swatting flies, and regardless of how you treat the lives of your gang, at the end of the day, there's still the trail of corpses. Some of that may feel a bit spoilerish, but most of the game is outside of story beats. It's little moments of optional interactions. The texture of playing it and moving through the world and seeing how these people are, well, living is a strong word, but their existence is interesting. These people have given up on living anything other than simple, joyful lives. I think the only actual frustration I had with the game design were its maps. Being a side view rather than a top-down meant the game got creative with going through doors and entrances to connect areas, but it got me turned around time after time. I mentioned at the top that this game has a vested interest in hurting you. Emotionally, yes. The story is grim and serious and tackles heavy subject matter. But the way the game plays is abrasive too. The game is mostly quiet, but occasional loud sound effects or flashes of light feel hostile. What I would call the lack of audio balancing feels intentional. When I think of the me who tried to play this game a decade or so ago, I don't think I would have understood all it was doing, but I can appreciate it now, with one exception. In classic, what if one gender vanished off the face of the earth hypotheticals, it really necessitates a follow-up question. What about trans and intersex people? I don't really know exactly how Lisa answers this, because the one area it's possible to answer the question, it kind of doesn't, but it also kind of does. In a place called the Beehive are a group of folks who act as prostitutes for the residents of Olathe. So, a group of people who are shunned by larger society but still seen as sexual objects? Sure sounds like trans women to me. The only upside in their portrayal is that they don't take shit. Our introduction to them is a loser who doesn't want to pay up getting a baseball bat to the face. There's a lot to dig into that the game just doesn't. It's a side area of a game that's filled with side areas. None of the characters have more than a single line of dialogue that is going to try to be jokey. Lisa doesn't dig its grave in this way because it's too busy digging a bunch of holes in the yard. Lisa the Painful headslides into 4th place. It's great. The messaging is subtle until it punches you in the face. In a world where all the men are awful, can a man really rise above that? No. Valkyria Chronicles, a game that was definitely made by someone with a fetish for mandatory military service and monarchies, is a tactical RPG developed by Sega and Media.Vision, and published by Sega for PS3 and 4, Windows, Switch. I picked it because it was in my partner's library, and she recommended it. With how the Persona rec went, I was cautiously optimistic. The game opens with war. The world of the game is a fictionalized version of Europe. Instead of many countries, there are 3. Their specific names I've forgotten, but it's the Federation, Empire, and the one we are in, Gallia. The Empire has started a war of aggression against the Federation for the oil substitute resource, Ragnite. Gallia, the usually neutral nation, has also been attacked for its rich deposits of the material. Through the game, you play as Welkin and the militia squad of Gallia, trying to protect your country. The gameplay is a mix of turn-based combat and third-person shooter. Each turn, one side gets a set amount of command points to move their units and take actions. Then there are named classes that play slightly different. Using those points to take control of a character has you move around and perform up to one action, usually shooting. Consecutive uses of the same character tires them out and they can't move as far. I generally have praises for this game, but the caveats run deep. To start, the entire game has a sketch filter, which adds to its aesthetics. It's a book and story being told, not events we're technically witnessing firsthand. I also quite like the strategy required in missions. The entire thing is well crafted for what it is. It's a standard war tale. Sure, there are anime shenanigans and a handful of superpowered individuals, but they don't make or break the war effort. So, now I've gotten some positives out of the way, I want to gripe. Its depiction of war, individuals, and the reasons for hate are realistic, I guess. War is tragedy. There were multiple times in this game that just bummed me out when I thought about them in any broader or real scope, because war is just bad. Which is an elementary school thing to say, but can you really say that's wrong? War is awful. Humans die en masse for an elite class that is just using them as leverage in the meat grinder, as either as meat or the machine. Every side loses. In Valkyria Chronicles' portrayal of this, there isn't really a choice either. So too in real life. What other choice is there than to fight back against the people who would see you dead? I think Valkyria Chronicles' most bizarre addition of topics to tackle is bigotry. In a game where the darkest skin tone I saw was an optional soldier who could only really be described as tan. And yet, we are given a fictional group for people to be racist at. The Darksons, a people whose primary common trait is dark hair. But don't worry, in-game there's a reason for people to be bigots. The proposed reason is that at a point in the past, Darksons were actually in control of a large swath of territory, and they got too close to their sun with their Ragnite research, and they blew a bunch of stuff up, which is just so exhausting. Whatever, the developers wanted to have their bigotry and refute it too. But there's a wrinkle here. Many, but one stood out time after time. Welkin, the main character, has an adopted sister, Isara. She is Darkson. Rosie, the racist character, and another member of 7th Squad, is racist, and specifically to Isara multiple times. Welkin, the leader of the squad, and her older brother, does nothing when these two fight. In any of multiple scenes, it would have been perfectly reasonable for Isara and Rosie's quote-unquote conflict to resolve with him telling Rosie off. But the only person who ever intervenes in these is someone Rosie is friends with, and eventually I'd say Isara too, Largo. His intervention boils down to Rosie, stop being racist. Isara, stop riling up the racist by existing. So, yeah, what else to say about the game other than horrendous handling of war and racism? Enemy turns can take a long time, either because there's a lot of people to move or they're doing unnecessary moves. The AI at times can be pretty bad and dumb, but it's fine for what it is. Valkyria Chronicles goes to war for the 13th spot, right below Persona 4. Both games are so well crafted, but they have these horrible sins that keep them from being any better. Honestly, towards the end, they might slip down the list. 2015. Off-Peak, What If Train Stations Were Cool? Is a first-person adventure game developed and published by Cosmo D for PC. I picked it up because I'm a fan of the surreal. It opens with your character arriving at a train station. They must go to the next stop, but have no ticket. Luckily, a nearby man will give us his ticket, if we can find all the pieces. Your gameplay is simple. Walk around a train station and find all the pieces of the ticket. Your only method of interaction is an interact button. This game made me sad. The main antagonist, sort of, is the owner of the station, whose name escapes me, but his approach to the station is one I don't think I'll ever see in the US. His train station is curated. Art hangs from the walls and ceiling, music and vendors chosen specifically for the vibe, a bar to hang out and play board games at. Shout out to the unexpected Netrunner presence. More realistically, this game is an art installation of inspiring works for the creator. This is much like other artsy titles I've covered, short and sweet. Off-Peak gets off the station at 21st. It's got a good vibe. What's the more to say? Her Story, the most and least effective search engine I've ever used, is an interactive film game developed and published by Sam Barlow for PC and mobile. I picked it because it's yet another game that had heaps of praise that I've just never touched. The opening premise and gameplay loop are roughly one and the same. You are sat in front of a computer with a goal of going through footage to find the story of a missing man. The interviews are all jumbled and in pieces, so you must search words used by the woman in the video to find more videos. I think the most telling aspect of how successful this game hooked me was that I filled a piece of paper with search terms, 5 columns, then some on the back. My downside for figuring out anything past the over 75% footage I viewed was mostly in not using more innocuous words or using the more advanced methods of searching. Even still, I was able to find more than enough to piece large parts of the narrative together, and what I found was a story I adored. I think what I find most fascinating in its construction is that it's a thing that can be experienced in an infinite number of ways. What words you search and what criteria you're looking for entirely change the order in which information is revealed to you. More than that, there are loose ends that feel fine. More than even that, it found a way to incorporate an ending, which I was curious how it would accomplish from the start. Then there is the performance of its sole actor. Viva Seifert? You turn in an absolutely stunning performance. Great. Her story catalogs its place in fourth. It's a solid story with an interesting central mechanic. Dropsy. Oh wow, this game looks interesting. Oh, I forgot I don't like point and clicks. Is a point and click hug venture developed by Tendershoot and A Jolly Corpse and published by Devolver Digital for PC, mobile, and Switch. I picked it because it was surreal and looked a little horrific. The game opens with our main clown character, Dropsy, in a nightmare. Everything is on fire, and he's swallowed by a mouth in the floor. As a side note, I might have missed a cutscene because I think one or two games I've played, the cutscenes don't play. I don't know why. Reality for Dropsy isn't too much better. In a rundown circus tent, you make your way outside to find your dad going to work. You've got to deliver a present to your dead mom at her headstone. This somewhat covers the story. You'll be doing some off-the-wall stuff. The gameplay is much like all the others I've done. It's a point-and-click game. The gimmick here, if that's what you can call it, is that you have little animal friends that follow you around and you can use them to solve some puzzles. It's cute, I guess. You run around helping people so you can hug them. As much as that seems self-centered, you are doing a lot of good for the people, 90% of the time. It's a nice through line, though. I feel like a lot of adventure games are more adversarial or mean. The music's good. The world has some fun elements and lore to it. Dropsy hugs its way to 28th. I don't know. I think I'm just really over point-and-click games. The only ones I'd play from here on out in my life are probably just the really standout ones. But I've played a large number of what are considered classics on this list and then a handful before then. I think I've just had my fill. 2016. Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor, an invitation to think about just how small you are, is an anti-adventure game developed by Sunday Month and published by Tiny Build for PC. I picked it initially because of the name, and then the plot elements hooked me to try it out. The opening premise is that you are a janitor for a spaceport. One day you find a treasure map that you decide to follow into the planet's dungeons because it might get you enough money to get off planet. But whoops, you're cursed now and there's a floating skull following you around and saying, "Bwah!" Now you've got to figure out how to lift the curse. The gameplay is simple. Run around and collect trash. Your job entails burning the trash to receive credits, but there are valuable things mixed in with that detritus. Some stuff is worth selling, keeping, or using. There's a day-night cycle, hunger, dysphoria, and luck to worry about, so the game isn't just burning trash. If you're only ever burning it, it's unlikely you'll make enough money to rid yourself of the curse. I really liked this game, initially. Its art and music were charming, and the spaceport feels alive. The main thrust of being a nobody who is just working their 9 to 5 while also stuck with a weighing skull is relatable. You don't go anywhere fantastical. You're never able to buy the expensive weapons and armor to go adventuring. You're a janitor, stuck in one spot, cursed. I think in total, this game speaks for itself in a lot of the ways it plays. Cops are going to bust you and eat your money. Gender is a thing you have to buy, because capitalism. Any food above nutrient slop is stupidly expensive. You're always going to get the raw end of a deal. You can be surrounded by wonder and beauty, and it doesn't matter because every day of your life is a struggle to get enough money to survive or get out of a bad spot. I also liked the addition of the diary, as simple as it is. Jotting down your daily activities and what you did was the only leeway of true self-expression. Sure, you have to pick up new genders every couple of days, but there's only so many to choose from. Getting to know the lay of the spaceport was satisfying too. By the end of my playtime, I roughly knew how to get to various places, even without a map. The spaceport is dense, as it ought to be. There are only 1 or 2 places in the port that don't have a vendor hawking wares. My one criticism is that it could have been shorter. My runtime sits at around 6 hours. It could have been 1 and maybe a half shorter. There were a couple of requirements for the main quest that just relied too much on luck and grinding, in my opinion. Sure, the grind and monotony feeds into the game's themes. Maybe it's just part of my problem that I can't get lost in the zen of existing in the world. Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor sweeps its way up to the 27th spot. I think over time, as I sit and stew with this game, it will find its way further up the list, but for now, this is a good spot. It's got a good mix of mechanics that engage without giving too much to ruin its own purpose. I Am Setsuna, a cake made entirely of fondant, is a turn-based RPG developed by Tokyo RPG Factory and published by Square Enix for PS4, Vita, Switch, and PC. I picked it because sometime in my past it was floated as a game to play and it stuck. Story a lot of these games, I suppose. But any glance at the game is intriguing. It's beautiful to look at and cites inspiration from Chrono Trigger. The opening puts us in the shoes of a mercenary, hired to save a girl from monsters. That mission complete, we're approached by a mysterious person who hires us to kill a girl. A sacrifice. Away we go. Quick note, however, the sacrifice keeps monsters from overrunning the world. It's a regular thing. The gameplay is this list's first active time battle turn-based game. Bars fill up, you select your move. The primary difference here is its Sprint Knights, gems that you equip on your character that give you new actions and passive effects. As it's published by Square Enix, or probably even if they weren't, it takes directly from Chrono Trigger's combo moves. If characters have the right Sprint Knight equipped, they can use combo moves with the other characters in the party. I was a bit underwhelmed by this game. I was expecting a hidden gem or a title that may not actually be the next Chrono Trigger, but was respectable in its own right. I was incorrect. I found the story bland. I never really felt invested or surprised beyond the opening. The characters are fine, mostly falling into tropes, but still doing enough to at least do some things I haven't seen as much. The combat always felt too volatile. Hits on the party almost always dealt a ton of damage that you had to mitigate or heal. I had a fairly breezy playthrough up until one boss in the latter half of the game. Before that, most bosses provided a challenge, but I didn't really need to gear my party, level, or have a specific composition. That changed with this boss, and if you've played Setsuna, you probably know the one. I think this game's primary issue is actually its playtime. Undoubtedly constrained by budget, I Am Setsuna feels like it should be an entirely linear RPG with occasional side content. Instead, it is linear until it's not, where it feels expected that you'll want to wander around the world, level up, get some items. But by that point, the game is almost over. There are positives. The art and music are phenomenal. The continent is entirely snowy, which enhances the somber, quiet atmosphere. Every time you trudge through snow, you can see the deep path your characters cut through it. The music is almost entirely just a piano, which is fantastic. It feels like a conscious decision rather than a budgetary constraint, though I can't say which it was. The combat system was... I wouldn't say I liked it, but it has its cool aspects. Maybe I just haven't found them, but it feels rare in RPGs that you can become truly overpowered. Here, though, you can get the right mix of Sprit Knights that let you one-shot even the final boss, which is really cool. The last game I've played in memory that lets you do that even was Clair Obscur. I Am Setsuna palely imitates its way to 34th place. Aside from music and art, I just never found anything spectacular. Yakuza Kiwami, touching crime noir story featuring Goro Majima jump scares, is an action-adventure beat-em-up developed by Ryuga Gotoku Studio and published by Sega. It's come out on just about everything, and I picked it to play because there's like 9 of these games, and dang it, I just gotta know what's under the hood. I had technically played it previously, but never beaten it. I played the Legacy Yakuza Kiwami instead of the unnecessary new Yakuza Kiwami. I can't be bothered to pay $2 for a version that is better optimized and slightly graphically improved. It is worth mentioning, before going any further, that Yakuza games have prodigious side content that I did not indulge this time around, though I have before. Yakuza Kiwami opens with an introduction to Kiryu Kazuma. He's in the Yakuza as a member of the Tojo clan, although he's in the Kazuma family, which itself is a subsidiary of the Dojima family. Organized crime hierarchy is complicated. It gives you an introduction to crime life. Kiryu is going to collect some money from business that it owes. Towards the end of the first chapter, events unfold and he's put in jail for 10 years. It then follows his release and a plot involving a lot of major players that has been in the making for that decade. Yakuza's gameplay is primarily a beat-em-up, either with strangers on the street or story fights. You'll be sending an obscene amount of people to the hospital. You've got 4 styles of combat, many combos, and an upgrade tree. While role-playing is not in the defined genre here, it's definitely applicable. The other aspect of Yakuza's gameplay are the minigames and side stories. Kamurocho is chock full of places to play around and people to interact with. You've got card games, board games, gambling, bowling, batting, pocket car racing, bug women battling, karaoke, going to cabaret clubs, and probably still a dozen others I'm unaware of or forgot to mention. To give you an idea, my playtime for almost just the main story was around 18 hours. Time to Beat's estimate for a completionist playthrough? 84. While that number would be lower if you're not concerned about learning Mahjong or Shogi, there's still a ton there. I really love Ryuga Gotoku Studios' ethos for crafting these titles. At least, I assume the others have similar densities of stuff. Taking a single, fictional district and breathing life into it. Sure, there are plenty of shop fronts that are just PNGs behind glass windows or copy-pasted restaurants, but it's brimming with life. Kamurocho feels alive in a way most other open-world games don't. I tried to search for other similarly dense games, but the results were open world, not open district, so I only really came up with 3 results. Shenmue, which is more a precursor to Yakuza and a way paver. The other 2 I found are Troublemaker, an Indonesian take on the genre set in the midst of school, then Hood Story Kaito Yamazaki, about a delinquent in Osaka, which has AI-generated audio prompts for characters? Bad form. You're going to get more people playing your game by just not using AI than having English audio. All that to say, there's really no other people doing it like Ryuga Gotoku. especially considering their weird insistence on bringing people back from the dead to act in their games. I played on easy because my primary goal was the main story, but I mention it here because even on easy it didn't always feel like a cakewalk. While lower tier enemies would evaporate with a single combo, there was still the occasional challenge. For someone playing more than just rushing through the story, I think it's worth playing on normal. In all of the soundtrack, I have to mention one in particular. Get Over It will play, I'm not entirely sure when, aside from various story moments from tense or combat times, but it has an element of melancholy to it, which really plays to Kiryu's character. He always seeks out resolution to conflict, but not necessarily conflict itself, it's just how things end up. There's a bit of that in the song. It just has that feeling. Of course, the other fight themes are excellent, and the game's just got good music, but it always stood out to me. The story is great. It's got good to great pacing and emotional beats that got me. The themes, strong. The downside, it isn't the nicest game to women when it considers them at all. Yakuza is too yaoi to care about its women. There's 3 in the cast. As much as they do them dirty, it could always be worse. But I mean, you're involved with organized crime. How much more toxically masculine can you get? It's always interesting to see a comparably moral Kiryu rub against the grain this way, though. He's never interested in power for power's sake, which ends up pushing him outside or to the bottom of the family. Yakuza Kiwami fights its way to the 2nd spot. And in a twist upset, before it even got there, Moon Remix RPG Adventure snagged the number 1 spot over Mother 3. I never got tired of a dozen dudes showing up in a room, loudly proclaiming how tough they were, then leaving with them writhing on the ground in pain. Combine that with its world, story, and sub-stories, and you've got a game that really shines. 2017. Before I jump into 2017, I'll mention that every game I played was picked by my wife beforehand. I had no input. She did select over the 3 to be safe, whether I'd played them before or so I could veto a couple, but that's it. The difference between us, The Thinking Ponies Disco Elysium, is a visual novel by Robin Daydream for PC. My wife picked it because it's gay, it's got My Little Pony, and she thought it'd be funny. The premise is that you are in the perspective of Fluttershy going on her first date with Pinkie Pie, who asked her out. You read the dialogue and pick choices. One route is about 30 minutes, and the branching paths are different enough to be worth exploring the ways the date can go. As it's a visual novel, the only aspect is the story, and it's good. The premise of a first date with a friend you've known for a long time is an interesting space to play in. Contrary to Twilight Sparkle's advice, it's not just like hanging out. This MLP fan game is interested in the friction between being friends and dating. It tells you right away that there are no right or wrong choices. I'm not overly familiar with MLP, but what I read here seems to understand the characters well. No responses seem out of field for Fluttershy, the shy pony who can be bold, and Pinkie Pie, confident bouncy pony that has her insecurities. Are they good for each other? Who knows? But they have something more than friendship brewing, and they want to explore what that means. The difference between us provides a nice quiet date spot at number 41. In what used to be a low spot, 41 now sits a comfortable 24 spots from the bottom. While what it has is strong, it just doesn't have much. But that's okay. Yo Noid 2, Enter the Void, Pizza, is a platformer made by, well, it's a Game Jam game, so I'm just going to put the credits to the creators on the screen and a link to the page in the description. My wife picked it because there was pizza, and Blubbly loves pizza, and she loves Blubbly so much, so do I. The premise is that years after the events of the first game, The Noid is a changed Noid. They deliver pizzas instead of ruining them. But tragedy strikes and their yo-yo is stolen. Better get it back. The gameplay is a simple platforming affair. Run, jump, wall jump, and grapple things with your yo-yo. This is a tight game jam project. As a game jam project, this feels well-paced and utilizes all of what they made. The game jam was 2 months, and what they've got is impressive. The controls are simple and tight, so all the use cases of your platforming kit feel explored. I had a couple challenges with controls or camera, but in general, they were more user error than the game's fault. But it's also a 2-month game, it's not going to be exactly perfect. It helps that the game isn't punishing for those failures and mistakes. The story also works. It fits perfectly in its constrained development time. It adheres to the vibe of an advertisement game, while also giving it an indie twist. That runtime also helps keep things like music limited and crisp. Noid 2, Enter the Void, Yo-Yo grapples its way to 12th. It's good. The music bops, the characters are funny, the story is more than bargained for, the controls are mostly tight. It's a solid, compact, complete thing. Cattails, Warrior Cats X Stardew Valley, is an RPG made by Falcom Development for PC and Switch. My wife picked it because you can be a little kabibbin. But I'll be honest, I was a Warrior Cats girly growing up, and I had avidly read up to the Power of 3, I think? So even way back when this game came out, I had my eye on it. But I just never bit the mouse and bought it. So, thanks to my wife for putting it here. The opening premise is that your adoptive two-leg family drops you on the side of the Thunder Path. You're happened upon by Coco, who helps you get your bearings and introduces you to one of the 3 colonies. Now live your glorious little kitty life. The gameplay is, you're a little kitty cat. You hunt, which involves creeping toward prey before you pounce. You fight, either with other cats over territory disputes or pesky bats. You can swim through rivers. You can forage, the plants giving a variety of benefits. 90% of this game is just Warrior Cats roleplay. That other 10% being Stardew Valley vibes of daily life and characters to form relationships with. All told, however, your primary goal is to finish what I call the Catmunity Center. Early on, Coco tells you that the guardian of the forest went missing. They think it has something to do with the arcane pillars in the basement of the temple. Each of those pillars requires sacrifices of the various fauna and flora of the forest. But that 90% number is no joke. While there are technically things to do outside of the Catmunity Center, like mining, most of the draw of this first title is just running around as a cat in the woods. Most activities either don't have rewards equivalent to effort, or need so much time invested that you could spend 60 hours in this game getting them all for the effect of changing your coat's color or getting decorations. Because the characters feel like they'd have depth if they had more than a handful of lines each. I did enjoy the music and sprite work, especially when you begin sneaking, as the music respects your attempts at stealth and lowers its volumes. Also, if you slide around on the ice long enough, your cat starts spinning, which is adorable. Cattails pounced its way to 46th. Not as high as I anticipated. Its threadbare story and trouble keeping me engaged left me wanting to slink away. From my cursory investigations of the second game, it solves a lot of these issues. Cattails' Wildwood story appears to have a more central story, more fleshed out side content, and in general be a more well-polished title. So check that out if you want to be a little cat. 2018. Heaven Will Be Mine, messy sci-fi mecha Yuri, my beloved, is a visual novel created by Pillow Fight Games for PC and mobile. I picked it because it's trans art. I'm intrigued by the premise and big robots. I wanted to learn more about Halamy, the prolific chaser poster's origins. The story's premise is that on an alternate version of Earth during the Cold War, there was an existential threat in space. They made some technology, fought it, defeated it, and decided to bring all quote-unquote humans back to Earth. Not everyone wants to go back, though. So, there are 3 factions in space with differing goals. The Memorial Foundation, whose goal is to bring everyone back into the fold on Earth safely. Cradle's Graces, who wants humanity to accept their place among the stars. And finally, Celestial Mechanics, who wonders if, instead of returning to humanity, what if you went further away? You start the game by picking a pilot and their faction to follow. It's a visual novel, but how you poke through the menus is different. After openings, you have access to emails, missions, and text chat. You could just rush all the missions, but I enjoyed reading emails and seeing the pilots interact with the non-pilots. The visual aspects of the game work really well. While the function of in-between mission UI is the same between pilots, each one also has unique color scheme, sound effects, and background information that you get. As it's a visual novel, again, there isn't a lot to talk about apart from the story. Story being the thing in these snippets I talk about in the most roundabout ways to avoid spoilers. Heaven Will Be Mine's story is fantastic. It tore out my heart and used so many complicated and messy feelings in my blood as paint for its canvas. The pilots, Lunaterra, Pluto, and Saturn, are all well-written and fun. The factions and additional email and texts add background information that isn't just world lore, but a way to deepen the themes at work. The mech design reflects their personalities. The music can be subtle or blaring. Either usage is powerful. In my mind, this is more of what I would want out of visual novels. Using the fact that you have more control than just advancing the text one box at a time. This title is still mostly in that vein, but this, at least, is the bare minimum of what I'd expect of a visual novel. Heaven Will Be Mine fights for what it believes all the way to the top spot. It is the new greatest game of all time, which is really funny because I never thought a visual novel would make that spot. I knew it would be high up on the list. I knew I'd enjoy it. I enjoyed it. When it came to ranking, I couldn't fall back on thoughts about gameplay, so I turned to decisions based on which game I'd rather give to a me that hadn't played either. By this metric, there was no contest. The entire game and all 3 endings were cathartic in a way I hadn't expected. So, greatest game of all time. So, that was my June. Due to it being the halfway point of the year and, slightly over halfway point of my 100 games, I figure I'd talk a bit about my thoughts on these past 67 and the remaining 33. Specifically, I want to talk about how I am now out of the classic games years that set this whole journey off, games that are 10 years or older. Also, that the classic games I picked contain a mix of things that are definitely not what most people would consider classic. Though I'm sure people have nostalgia for playing something like Lady Sia, it's never making any lists of the best Game Boy games. One issue with selecting the classic games I could play is that I've already played a lot of the good ones. Not all, certainly, or titles like Grim Fandango wouldn't be here. So, as I progress, it's worth bearing in mind that I don't have a strong recency bias, but it's not zero either. In picking games from 10 or more years ago, there were really two qualifiers. Was it good, or did it look interesting? However, doing it this way enabled me to find stuff I would have never considered before. Sure, Mother 3 and Deus Ex were on my radar as foundational to gaming and good games, but I had just written them off as things I just wouldn't touch. There are the indie projects like Gingiva, Off-Peak, or Space Funeral, under-recognized things like Pandora's Tower I never would have seen. Then there are the titles I knew I'd like, but never got around to playing or beating, like Lisa, Yakuza, and Shiren. I had joke picks that surprised me, like Robot Alchemic Drive, The Bouncer, or Cute Night. The last 33 games all have these elements. And I also never went into a game expecting to be disappointed. Mostly because I had already weeded those picks out with my selection process, but it still stands. It's a relief that I'd never have to spend another $1 on this stupid hobby to have good and interesting games to play for the rest of my life. But it's awesome that there are new games being released that are just as good and just as bad as the old. Gaming is not better now than it was then. Gaming is not worse now than it was then. As with all things, beautiful art will continue being made. Humans are bound to their need to express creativity, and we can all benefit from it. As the very last thing, if you're curious what I'll be playing next month, I'm going to ballpark how many I'll play, a little over, and who knows if I'll be wrong. I'll be playing 2018's Plague Tale: Innocence and Wandersong, 2019's Devotion, Metro Exodus, and Terminator Resistance, 2020's Amori, Tonight We Riot, and Spiritfarer, 2021's Unmetal, Fuga, Melodies of Steel, and Foregone, 2022's The Spirit and the Mouse, Pentiment, and Tunic, and 2023's Swollen to Bursting Until I Am Disappearing on Purpose, Bloodwest, and Shifu. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.